when I first came to Foothill, we formed an employee organization for LGBT faculty, staff, and admins.
It's on your webpage.
Yeah, it's on my webpage. And that was also like a very radical thing to do at the time. And we became, with Stanford and Yale, the first community college. So we were the first community college district, Foothill and De Anza. We were the very first community college district to have domestic partners' health benefits in the United States.
Wow.
And that was huge. You have no idea how
like
radical. This was
wild.
Wild. Like now you live in the age of gay marriage and all this, and everybody's oh ho hum.
Yeah.
But we were completely pioneering in that. I
When
have
was
to
this
say the
again?
college. It was 1992.
Oh wow, so early 90s.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's
That's
25 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And so nobody was doing this, and literally at the same time that we did it, Stanford and Yale did it, and that was it. So in the entire United States, in all of higher education, there were 3 institutions that offered domestic partners health benefits for the first time ever in the United States in higher education.
Foothill, De Anza was one of them.
Foothill and De Anza were.
That's crazy.
Foothill, De Anza was one of the
That's
3
actually crazy.
with Stanford and Yale.
Yeah.
So right. So,
That's
and
amazing.
I admit, I am totally proud of that. We were on the right side of history with that little decision, but I was also really proud of the college.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes this college really gets out ahead of the world and changes the world, and that was a place, they took a significant risk. It was a non-trivial decision, and I have to say that particularly the administrators at the time were behind it and got it and decided that's Foothill, that's who we are, we're just going to do this.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful thing, I got to say, because even among the faculty at that time, there was significant pushback.
Oh yeah, how hard was it to get that?
It wasn't easy. No, it was totally an uphill battle.
Yeah.
So, but we won the uphill battle, and we won, I have to say, partly because Foothill was Foothill, and because the senior administrators, just decided this was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It was like, damn the torpedoes, I don't care. We're just going to do it. This is who we've always been. We're Foothill.
Yeah.
And that was literally their attitude.
Have.
That was literally their attitude, and they were 100% behind it. They were not the ones that had to be swayed. Yeah.
The other faculty
It was really the faculty union. The faculty union had all these concerns about how much will it cost, but there were also a significant number of faculty members back then who were quite homophobic. And openly so, and not afraid to say so.
Early 90s, there was a
early 90s, so it was a little bit more, it was a little dicey.
Yeah.
It wasn't awful, but it was at least it was not an automatic go-to, or everybody else would have done it. When the entire United States has not done this. Nobody in Silicon Valley had domestic partners health benefits yet either.
So
Apple and HP and all these people that have, everybody has it now, but nobody had it then.
No, it was
It was like San Francisco.
Very novel, yeah.
It was like the city of San Francisco, and then maybe a couple other major cities, and that was it.
How long did it take for other schools to adopt this? Like, how many years after would you say?
Oh, man, that's a really good question.
Foothill, De Anza.
I'm not sure. I don't think all schools had it.
It's definitely
Still
a gradient.
no. I don't think
time.
all the schools.
Well, I think it took a series of federal court decisions to really force people to do it at some point.
Yeah.
I think the ball definitely got rolling, but it was far from instantaneous.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure.
it took at least 10 years to really make even probably a majority.
Yeah.
So, honestly, it was a long,
Yeah.
long haul.
And it's still
It's
process
still,
right now.
now we're in danger of going backwards. That's
Yeah,
the scary
I know.
part. But anyway,
Scary.
but it's just kind of like, why am I proud to work at Foothill College? There's a lot of reasons, but that's definitely on the list. I think that was that was like a national accomplishment.
Oh,
And that's
definitely.
why I'm kind
Absolutely.
of like highlighting it,
First-
because it was bigger than we were. It was
First
bigger
3
than me.
schools to do that.
And I wasn't the only one, but I was at least, I was definitely part of the core leadership to get this done. I was like the new young radical faculty member from Stanford.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's just do this. What's the problem? And they're like, but it's scary. And it was scary, but it was fun. So
that's very
it was really
exciting.
fun. In fact, I'll tell you another story about the LGBT side.
Yeah.
So the other really sort of, in retrospect, hysterical part of this was when I first came. I had first come out at Stanford when I was a grad student, and if you can't come out of Stanford, what's the problem? So that was insignificant.
Yeah.
That was easy.
Okay.
But when I came here, I was already sort of out, right? So I came here and I was like, I'm gay. You guys know how I do this the same way, and. It was like such a big deal.
Yeah.
Wow.
There were, as then, there were plenty of LGBT faculty but almost everybody was closeted.
Oh.
So, they put me on the front page of the student newspaper, Professor Lankford is gay, blah, blah, blah. Not in a bad way, but more like this is like huge news that somebody actually came out. So now I look back and I think, oh, God. because it was a little cringy at the time. Like, you
Yeah.
don't have to put me on the freaking news.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. I'm an activist. I don't mind being on the front page.
Yeah, but maybe you're a
But it
front
just
runner to help other
shows. It
faculty.
just shows like what a
Yeah.
like how times have changed.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was
Yeah.
Can't even
hardly
imagine,
the only
yeah.
gay or lesbian faculty member. I mean, no.
Yeah. No, definitely
And
not.
that would be true in any group of people, but it's certainly true in groups of
Yeah.
faculty. But it was like the students perceived it as being this like earth-shattering thing that
Yeah.
somebody would actually just say so.
Would you say that generation of students at the time was more progressive though than the faculty? So did they understand that more and were more accepting of you than the rest of the faculty around you? Does that make sense?
That's an interesting question. No, actually, I think there was more out-and-out homophobia then, and I think I think the students now, in general, are pretty completely non-homophobic.
Yeah.
And
I think
I
for the most
think
part.
present company included. But
Yeah.
so I actually think that the student environment was a little bit. It was never really like hyper homophobic here.
Yeah.
But I do think that there was a larger percentage of students who would be really flipped out by it.
Really,
And now the
yeah.
percentage of students is pretty micro that's flipped out. It tends to be international students from
Yeah.
very conservative countries
Mhm.
who have never just encountered this
Yeah,
in
it's
their
just like
education.
a
Like,
matter
so
of
welcome to America.
experience and like
Yeah.
knowing that this is acceptable.
Yeah, so I think in most people, it's not the first. I mean, that's the thing. It's like for most students, it's not the first time you ever met an out gay person.
Yeah.
In 1991, it was like often like the first time.
The first
like,
time.
Like, I never knew a gay person before. People would say that to me all the time. It was really funny, and I
Oh
would
my
kind of
God.
laugh. Like, yeah, I bet you never knew a gay person.
Yeah.
What I was thinking.
Yeah.
But they really thought that.
Wow.
I thought, that's cute.
That's so different.
That's so cute
different, yeah.
that you think that.
Oh my-
But like, yeah, so I'll be a good starter gay guy for you. I'll be your first gay friend or your
Oh
first
my
gay
gosh.
teacher or your first gay whatever, and
That
then you
must
can
have
get
been
over
hard,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Assimilating to, I mean,
It wasn't so hard here. I mean, again, I don't want to exaggerate. I mean, that was back then. People would get fired. That's why
Yeah.
that's why a lot of faculty members, the older faculty members, had come into their careers at a time in which you would get fired.
Mhm.
And if they didn't do it openly, they would just quietly find a reason to fire you. Not necessarily at Foothill, by the way, but at most places.
yeah. That's
So,
even
and
worse.
that's still true for a lot of faculty members, even now,
Yeah.
that still can be true in large parts of the country. I mean, we don't
Yeah.
like to talk about it, but
Yeah.
that's one reason these employment protections really
Mhm.
matter.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they can fire you for being gay or lesbian, often they will.
And find an
And they're not going to do
ulterior
it here.
reason
I don't
to
think
do
they're
it,
going to go
which is
backwards
almost
at
worse.
Foothill or in the Bay
Cover
Area.
your
But
tracks.
outside the Bay Area bubble, this is like a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And even I remember conversations with friends. Like, I had a friend who was a fairly well-known architect in San Francisco. And he'd come out of grad school. He went to a fabulous grad school and got his architecture degree. And he was the hot young architect. And I remember having long conversations with him in San Francisco about how he was afraid to come out at work. And I'm like, in architecture
Yeah.
in San Francisco? Are you kidding? But it was totally serious for him.
Yeah.
And I think I was just not, aware of the level of homophobia. It was certainly in Silicon Valley. I mean, now Tim Cook and everybody else is out, right?
Mhm.
So Peter Thiel, so now you got these Silicon Valley captains of industry
Yeah.
who are all out, and it's no problem, and that's great.
Mhm.
But I mean, even that's pretty recent in Silicon
Yeah,
Valley.
It is.
It's still a pretty straight boys club, and so the problems that women have breaking in Silicon Valley
Mhm.
had also been a problem for people who were out and gay. Now I think it's pretty much changed.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Wow.
when Tim Cook came out, it was like that was a big deal to people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That was non-free. I don't know if you remember,
When-
but it was only like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, or whenever. How long has Jobs been off the planet? But it wasn't. It was about a year after
it
he
was
stepped into the CEO role,
5 years or less.
and it was like the worst kept secret in Silicon Valley. But for
Yeah.
him to actually say publicly, "Yes, I'm
Mhm.
gay," was like a pretty
Huge
big.
deal.
It was a
Yeah.
huge deal
It's
in Silicon
groundbreaking.
because that had really never happened at the CEO level, especially when it's the Apple computer CEO,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the new Steve Jobs,
Mhm.
go on,
Mhm.
right? So even a few years ago, that was a big deal in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I taught exactly 20 years ago. It
Mhm.
happens to be the 20th anniversary.
Oh wow.
So I taught the world's first online version of an LGBT lit class
Okay.
Wow.
at Foothill College in 1997 when you guys.
See, why don't
were
people
barely
know
on
about
the
this?
internet.
God.
Well, that's back to nobody knows.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so So one of the reasons I said yes to this was that I was remembering the fact that I was actually a really intense and interesting, fascinating class. I still am friends with some of the students who took this class 20 years ago.
Wow.
Through the magic of Facebook.
That's crazy. What happened to the class now?
What?
Why isn't it still going on?
Oh, it is. That's the point.
Oh,
so I'm teaching it this spring. So that's the online class that I'm teaching.
So
I'm
teaching.
Bringing it back.
That was one reason I said.
anniversary.
It was one reason that I said, oh, okay, because I haven't taught online in a long time.
Yeah.
I like to teach face to face better anyway.
Yeah.
But there are some weird advantages to online classes.
There are,
particularly for that. This whole thing about it's not embodied in an LGBT lit class. That actually turns out to be a really cool thing.
Yeah.
Like you could sign on. You could sign on in your persona as a female, for example, right? And you would know.
So
It would be really cool for an LGBT class. Like you
That is
don't
really
have
cool.
to be your actual gender. That's the whole concept of the class.
Yeah, it
So
opens up
and
people
who would
more.
know? There's the thing. I don't know.
Wow.
You know?
Definitely opens people up more. 'cause
Sean,
there's less
Sean
barriers,
could be a
right?
girl, right? That's possible.
Oh.
People are probably more willing to share their opinions on it because there's less stereotypes because you're not seeing the person, right? So that's perfect for that class.
Exactly. So I kind of for that particular class, it turns out to be a really cool thing.
So is that the first time in 20 years that? Is this the
Oh
first time
no!
you're doing
Everybody.
that?
And the other good thing about it was I taught it. I wrote the class and I taught it face to face, and then I taught it online.
Okay.
And then eventually, which is what I wanted to happen, I kind of passed the torch to other people in the faculty. So like gay faculty taught it, and lesbian faculty taught it, and straight faculty taught it. Kella taught it for a number of years. She's straight, and so. Cool, trans faculty taught it, so it was kind of passed around.
Yeah,
so I didn't have to do my thing. That was the whole idea. So I had kind of successfully cloned it off onto the world, which was what I wanted to happen.
Have other community colleges adopted it at all?
Oh yeah, now everybody's.
So
now it's kind of a
California
thing. Yeah, this was back. It was really kind of a new frontier back at that point.
Okay.
So in '97, there were just a few places that had any kind of LGBT lit, even face to face.
Yeah.
And we were really early on that one too, but we weren't first.
Yeah.
We were close, but we were not first.
Yeah.
But with the online thing, because online was brand new. So
Yeah.
that was like the early.
20 years ago.
Oh my
That was
God,
like the
1997.
early Star Trek
Oh my
1
God.
pioneer days,
Yeah.
like impulse power.
Kids were trying to take online classes because that was kind of the cool thing to do, or maybe.
Well, it was, and we had people from all over the world sign up, which was the other cool thing about it. So
That
the
is
other thing that you can do with an online class is that you've got these students from somebody literally could sign up from India.
Yeah.
And somebody literally could sign up from so people signed up from all over the country, and I had a couple of people from other countries.
Wow.
Because it got a little bit of press
exciting
back then.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, so this is just partly to make myself feel okay about it. I'm actually just need the money from my mom right now, so I partly just said I need an extra class.
Yeah.
And this is what they handed.
It's good that you're doing that class.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have chose to take it on a different class, I'm sure. But
No, I couldn't.
Oh, you couldn't.
I've been here for like 30 years now, right?
Yeah.
So I started in 1989, so we're getting close.
Yeah, almost there.
We're not quite.
Yeah.
The countdown is on to 30 years. Yeah, 1989. Mike's like rolling his eyes. Like you weren't even a gleam in anybody's eye yet.
No.
Long time ago.
Your parents probably going to make babies.
God, a decade later we were.
Yeah, okay, so but what's really interesting is they had, I think, a stronger sense of themselves as the leading community college in the United States at that time. And sometimes that was a little nonsensical. Like, okay, it's not like anybody else is any good. I mean, there's 113 community colleges in California. Yeah. And Foothill Honors are not the only ones, but they really had this self-image. So here's what it was based on. All right. First of all, when Foothill was founded, the whole system called itself junior colleges. Right. Yeah. And Foothill, including our architecture, so the people who founded Foothill were basically like, we are not going to be this grown-up high school, right? We are going to be a full college, and we are going to look like a full college, and we're going to have a gorgeous campus, and we're going to have everything that any four-year college would have. And so they burst on the scene with this, star case, beautiful campus, fantastic faculty. Yeah. So they were born thinking of themselves as divas.
Oh, okay. So right from the get-go.
Yeah, right from the get-go. And they were explicit about this is who we are. And then they won all these architecture awards and all these innovation awards. So it was also Foothill who rebranded JCs, junior colleges, as community colleges. So Foothill and De Anza helped to, they were right at the forefront of this whole thing that now everybody calls them community colleges. There's only like Santa Rosa Junior College and one other college in California. Originally they were all, so this was Foothill Junior College when it was founded. So the idea of a community college, like what that means, was at least partially a Foothill De Anza creation.
Yeah.
Right? Like to conceive of yourself as a community college, not just a junior college.
Yeah.
And if you think what junior college means, so junior college kind of like, okay, everybody's going to be traditionally college age, and we're kind of junior to the four-year schools, so we're kind of like this glorified high school. That was the negative impact that it had. I don't think it has that so much. Every once in a while, if you meet somebody my age, they'll still say, you work at Foothill Junior College. Or they'll say you go to a JC.
There's definitely still a
Does anybody
stigma
ever say you? Yeah, there's like and that's one reason they wanted to get away from that stigma.
Yeah.
Right? They wanted to get away from the stigma, and they were aggressive about it. Like, we are not a junior college.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, there's definitely still a stigma to this day, but I don't think it's as bad as that. I mean, when my dad was growing up, he went to Gunn in the 80s, I think, and they called it the high school on the hill. That was like their little joke.
Well, and then so Foothill is a nickname for itself, actually, outside of Foothill, too. So when I came, it was like Little Harvard on a hill.
Yeah.
Right? And that was, you would hear that, like, all over the country. You work at that Little Harvard on a hill place. Thinks it's all that.
Yeah.
So they thought they were all that. But, so we changed the whole culture, or we were leaders in changing the whole culture of what it meant to be a community college, including to call it a community college, right? And then they pioneered all kinds of stuff. Like for a long time, there were more disabled students at Foothill College than there were at Cal. Like, so this long period of time where they were really out front in terms of outreach. So again, if you're going to be a community college, this is a college for everybody. Yeah. So they worked hard to, I mean, it started out as pretty much an all-white school, right? Not officially, but basically de facto. Yeah.
And, I mean, a lot of schools were almost all.
Oh, no, they were. I mean, they were sort of. I mean, and again, it wasn't officially this, but it was pretty much self-segregating. So, like, very early on, Foothill College, like, if you know who Wayne Wang is, have you ever heard of this guy? So he's a super famous Chinese-American director. Okay. Film director.
Wayne Wang.
Wayne Wang. Okay. And he went to Foothill College at a point at which he was like, there was like him and two other Asian students. So he was an international student. He lived at Hidden Villa. Yeah. Right? Oh. And then he went here, and then he went off to become Wayne Wang. And if you Google this guy, like, he's major director. So he really became a major film pioneer. Yeah. But it's not accidental if you look back that he went to Foothill College. Like, even if you look at the architecture of Foothill College, one thing that, as soon as I say it, it's like, do you notice that it has a Japanese influence? Yeah. All right. So think about when Foothill was built. This campus opens in 1960. We're basically like 15 years out from World War II.
Yeah, Japanese internment.
So major anti-Japanese prejudice still strongly existed. So to have Japanese influence architecture, so Foothill College comes out and looks a little bit like Japan. Yeah, I'm like, that was edgy.
That's making a big statement right off the top. That is edgy.
It was huge. It was huge, and of course, it's one reason the campus is so gorgeous. It's got this kind of gorgeous fusion architecture.
It won some award for modern architecture.
Absolutely did.
In the 60s when it first
absolutely did. So one of the reasons was that it so completely got it with the fusion architecture, right? And it became known as the California style. So another thing that I like to tease people about is people will come up to campus. Maybe this has happened to you. Maybe you said this. So people come up and say, "Oh, you look just like Pizza Hut." So does Gunn, by the way, not by accident. So people started cloning this look, and so A&W looks like Foothill College. Pizza Hut looks like Foothill College. It's not the other way around. It's not that we look like Pizza Hut.
It's that Pizza
Hut looks like us. Wow. And it's not, same thing with Gunn. So it's not an accident that Gunn has the same, actually not, but they lost the Japanesey influence. Yeah. If you notice, like, it's all blocky.
They're starting to build more blocky modern buildings. Yeah, it's like, it's clashing a bit, but
even the roof lines are not as elegant as our roof lines.
Yeah, no.
Like, if you look at the roof lines in Gunn, I mean, it's like a bad. I mean, Gunn's a pretty campus, but it's a bad clone. So is A&W, and so is Pizza Hut. So they basically take the shape. The shape is also extremely functional because inside the hat you can put all these like things. Another thing about this campus that was totally revolutionary at the time. Again, you guys would have no idea. But at the time, it was one of the first campuses anywhere in the United States that had underground wiring. So if you grew up in my, and you have no idea what this means, but if you grew up in my era, like in your, you probably see a lot in your country, Mike, of above-ground wiring still. Like if you walk down the street, there's just like cabling everywhere. Maybe not. Maybe it's all gone underground. But at least if you're old, and I say you're like, oh, what? All right. But if you're old enough in the United States, there's still neighborhoods in San Francisco that are like this, right? Yeah. Where you go and there's like there's like telephone poles everywhere, but they're not just telephones. So there's telephone lines, but also all the electric and all the telephone lines are above ground, and there's wires all over the place. Yeah, internet not, but there's wires all over the place, and it's really cluttery looking. So what you now take for granted is this sort of very clean design. There's no telephone poles. There's no wires anywhere.
I now understand.
Yeah.
Right? The wires are all under those sidewalks. So
At
the sidewalk, and at the time, this is totally unheard of and radical. So, and people forget. Like again, so this was basically the first campus that was purpose built for completely underground wiring, and it looks. I mean, you have no idea how much better it looks. Like if you go to a neighborhood in San Francisco, and like this year they're going to put the wires underground, it makes. Aesthetically, it just makes so much difference.
I can imagine.
So much difference. And again, you've never grown up in a place with those wires, so you don't know what I'm talking about because you have no idea because it's already, the world already changed. But it started to change here. Yeah. Like the same thing, like everybody's a community college now, right? So, but it started here.
Yeah. A lot of things apparently started
Disabled
here.
students all over the place. Yay, after the ADA. But we were working to make this campus accessible to disabled students. A decade or more before anybody made us do it. Yeah. And now we still got a long way to go. I don't want to say that we've done everything right. But literally there were more disabled students at Foothill College than there were at Berkeley for a pretty long time. And I think that's a pretty braggable thing.
That is. Berkeley's known for being very progressive.
Yeah, and they weren't when it came to accessibility and accommodating disabled students with any kind of... we still, I think, do a much better job than almost anywhere I know in helping students with learning disabilities. Right?
I can see
that.
So
we do a fantastic job. I mean, I'm going to brag on our Disabled Resource Center. Those people are world class.
Yeah.
God, are they good? And you people are lucky to get those services. And again, those services are almost de facto free to California citizens.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing thing to have that. I mean, you can go to a lot of places. I mean, I talk to students all the time who've gone to other schools, shelled out $50,000 a year, and not gotten anything like the quality of support and understanding and effective support that they get here for $32 a unit.
Oh my gosh, return on investment here is amazing.
Yeah. Well, so you would know, but it's So there's all these kind of brag. So Foothill really thought of itself as a nationwide leader, and that was one reason it was a little bit easier to sell them on the LGBT domestic partners health benefits, because they were used to being like the first penguin off the ice floe. Like they were used to being out front. That's one reason I was able to do the first online. We were way early in the online market, right? And again, Foothill, they were like, of course we'll be first in online. We're Foothill.
They want to be first.
We're Foothill.
Things, right?
Of course we'll be first. And so. And of course we'll do the first LGBT lit class online. Like, hell yeah, that's us. That's very Foothill. That's the way people thought of it. And because it was edgy, they liked it. Because they would get some flack, they liked it. They didn't want to think of themselves as just part of the pack.
Do you think we've lost that attitude with the administration?
No, I don't. Not with the new administration.
Not with the new,
I think just some of the culture... Well, it's also... Partly it was an illusion. So partly it's good to lose it because you think you're all special and often you're not. Yeah. Right? So I have to say that in some ways we lost it in a healthy way because we had all this attitude. Yeah. And half, a lot of the time it just wasn't well deserved. It was like my way or the highway kind of thing. And it's not like there's not other people doing incredibly innovative stuff. Yeah. Because there are. But at the same time, I'm not sure. So I feel like we're more conservative than we used to be. Maybe this is the old cranky guy who's been here too long, right? Exactly. So doesn't everybody say this?
I can see a trend for that, though.
Well, I don't know. That's one reason I wanted to brag about this. That's one reason I'm okay with bragging on Foothill because I don't want Foothill to forget who it is, right? Like we were all that, and maybe sometimes our head was a little bit big, and there were certainly a lot of places where we could have been way better. Yeah, but. Particularly if you look at Foothill and De Anza together as a community college district, dang. Yeah. This place, it had a nationwide reputation for very good reasons. It wasn't like, it didn't just like pop out of nowhere or because we had a pretty campus in 1960. Yeah. Like that was That helped.
Telephone wire underground.
That helped launch the ship, but they never backed off from wanting to be first.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure that that's as much the culture as it was back then. And again, sometimes that's a good thing because
I think there's more people with that attitude now too, so it like dilutes kind of the opportunity.
And again, it was always partly that. Well, what can I say? I mean, Silicon Valley, we're still out there, but there's not. It did have to do with being in Silicon Valley too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was an interesting.
Yeah.
That was an interesting kind of part of it as well, because Silicon Valley likes to think of itself that way, right? And so maybe it just means that innovative spirit is out there also, or always was. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I have to be careful because I brag too much. But I think of the things that I mentioned,
they're
actually real, though. That's the thing. Like I mean, I don't think it was entirely just this delusion that we're so good.
Yeah.
And we're all that. I really do think that they had some real leadership. And there's a couple others that would be harder for you to understand, but like community colleges in California are self-governed. Mm-hmm. And the faculty have a huge voice, and this is not true everywhere. Like in my home state of Colorado, it kind of seems like everything's run from a small room in Denver.
Students have a big voice, too.
Yeah, and the students have a big voice.
SSCCC.
And that was new, too. So Foothill De Anza set up and actually empowered student government. Yeah. Right? And by the way, back then, there was a lot of people from the GI Bill coming in, so they had been in the military. And they're like, don't treat us like little kids, because we are not. Excuse me. So they were like, we're not doing the sandbox student government. Yeah. But also in faculty governance, we took the lead statewide to create what is now known, quote unquote, as shared governance.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow.
And we were completely the leaders in that. And it's kind of like the new normal part. It's just like why you don't even notice that the wires are underground, because we won the war so completely that how would you know?
So shared governance is, so you guys started right off the bat including students in those dialogues, or it also gave the faculty more power?
Yeah, both. I mean,
so
there was
I don't know much about shared governance.
No, it was a real empowerment thing. So, well, I mean, the idea, again, is that the faculty have a significant, it's now been sort of written into the way community colleges are governed statewide. Okay. But the idea, actually, when Foothill started, this was very true. The administrators ran everything. Yeah. It was partly just, that was in the days when managers were sort of like these little gods everywhere. Not in the industry also. The industry thing has sort of shifted as well. Mm-hmm. But Foothill, so when Foothill started out, the president and the vice presidents, they ran the show. Yeah. The deans had incredible power. Yeah. And then eventually that power, that's power. So eventually that power gets abused, not just used. They used it mostly for good, but then they started like slipping. Yeah. So the faculty seized back a lot of power. And we had one of the first unions in the California for community college faculty, for example. We still have a separate union for Foothill De Anza. It's a very powerful union, but it was also very early and influential. So even in sort of like union politics for teachers, we were the leaders. We were one of the leaders. And Foothill is still one of the most powerful unions out there, even though there are a lot larger unions out there. But we still have this sort of influence on those debates. So, anyway, all those braggables, I just wanted to keep going.
Yeah, no, this is good.
Now we'll have the coolest podcast in California, right? So now we have to have that's back to. I'm going to, I'm working on this climate change thing. But one of the reasons I want to do it here is that I think that this is consistent with Foothill College. Yeah, like it's not like nobody else is not. It's not like nobody else is doing climate change. But I want Foothill to be part of the leadership. I don't want us to be part of the followership. Yeah. Like that hurts my Foothill ego. Yeah. Right. So I want to kind of be out there and pushing. Yeah. So I guess that's awesome. That's a lot, huh?
Yeah. If you think of any more braggable points, just go ham. Just that's
pretty good for Foothill. I'm happy with that. Yeah. I mean, we did. I also started here. I'll keep going. You're gonna have to edit the hell out of this thing.
Oh, it's fine.
See, you asked the right guy. I can talk on and on.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
All right. So another thing that I think is braggable myself is that when I came, a couple of us formed this thing called the Cultural Diversity Center, which was kind of the equity agenda. Now we have it. Now
award-winning too. Right?
Yeah, award-winning. So yeah, we won statewide awards. Now one of the reasons that we had done that is that Foothill had a long way to go back then. But even 10 to 15 years before that, they had hired on a whole deliberately to break down the sort of self-imposed segregation, right? they had hired very aggressively some of the best faculty of color in California. Like they hired a whole team, essentially. They went out and said, we're going to change this landscape.
Yeah.
We're Foothill.
Wow.
So we're going to change this.
The administration took that.
Yeah, so the administration deliberately went out and aggressively hired to break down. This was like the civil rights generation, right? But they said, yeah, we are a mostly white school. This is embarrassing.
Yeah.
And one reason is we don't have any faculty of color. So we're going to go find the best faculty of color in California, and we're going to have them work here. Mm-hmm. So a whole series of my colleagues were hired. There were like 10, I believe, 10 to 12. They're going to be mad that I can't remember whether it's 10 or 12. At this point, as of this year, no. As of last year, yes. Like Victoria Takeda was hired in that group, and she just retired.
I see.
So she's now emeritus. Don Dorsey was for a long time. Harry Satterfield was hired in that generation, and he had a PhD from Stanford. I mean, they hired PhDs from Stanford, blah, blah, blah. I mean, these people were like very world-class, but they were also into the mission of community college.
Yeah.
It was one reason I came here, because I saw that's who was here. Mm-hmm. So when I was making the decision at Stanford, which was a pretty non-standard decision, that I'm going to go teach at a community college, it was partly because, like, damn, they are all that. Like, look at who's teaching at this place. Look at the leadership that they've given on the things that I care about. Mm-hmm. So I was like, and I get to live in the Bay Area, and the campus is beautiful, and blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, all of that kind of factored in. Yeah. And because they had a strong union, the salaries and the benefits were great. So, I mean, it was kind of an easier decision because it was Foothill. Mm-hmm. I wasn't actually as sort of like, I mean, I really think I understood. This is one reason I want to brag, because I think I understood, I got it. Like, these people are really good.
Mm-hmm. So you came to Foothill right after graduating from Stanford?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I wasn't even quite done. I had to finish my dissertation. So I had my master's done, and I had to write my dissertation in my first year of teaching, which was a lot of juggling, but I managed to do that.
So your dissertation was on John Muir, correct?
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So the quick version of this is when I came, I went to like, you know, I was the civil rights generation again, so I was put on a bus and sent, happily, the best thing that ever happened to me, actually. Yeah. So I went from my little stereotypical white suburban high school in Denver, which was effectively segregated, right? And then Denver had a court desegregation order. This was the era of busing. Yeah. And Denver did it a little bit backwards, which was great. So they, instead of busing African-American kids out to the suburbs, they also bused white kids to the inner city.
That's good, actually. Yeah.
And that formula worked really well. So we had like CBS News showing up. I mean, it was just the best school still that I've ever been to.
Yeah, I read that too.
Ever. Yeah. And it changed and also I was okay in high school. I was not like, you know, I wasn't bullied but I was kind of like, I wasn't the quarterback dating the cheerleader. It was like one of those places where, you know, that's who you were going to get to be cool. Mm-hmm. You had to be this. And so when I went to that public high school.
Yeah. It was primarily African American?
It was more than 50% African American. Wow. It was like 60% African American. Okay. So, yeah. So whites were a distinct minority. Mm-hmm. But also, it was, again, the civil rights generation, of which I'm still a part. But like the best teachers in Denver had volunteered to teach at this school. Yeah. So they had a fantastic African-American staff that had always been there. And then they had some new teachers come in from outside who were like completely into it, like roll up our sleeves. Yeah. Martin Luther King, here we go. Yeah. We're doing this.
That's an exciting place to be.
It was especially huge. That time. And so, ironically, that also meant that I was able to go to this really snooty college, Williams College. Mm-hmm. So I went from like public education to highly elite, a super preppy school, which
very
was
preppy,
all
right?
good and
very
bad.
Preppy.
Yeah.
Good education, totally closety, I might add. Like so closety you didn't even know you were in the closet.
Wow.
Never saw it. There was not one out gay faculty member. This is the middle of the gay rights revolution, and there was like you would have just like crickets.
Where was Williams, Massachusetts?
In very very corner northwest corner, like really in Vermont. You could throw a rock out my window into Vermont. No,
really?
Like no joke.
Oh my gosh!
Like,
so it's in the middle of nowhere.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
So you're stuck on campus, kind of.
Yeah, and there's nothing. I was Mr. Nature Boy back then, so this was fine. So you can ski and hike and all this beautiful stuff. There's a lot of great environmental studies. Yeah, that's partly where I get the climate change thing. Incredible faculty student communication. Yeah. So a lot of my style comes from Williams. Yeah. Because like you sit in my office and we talk about stuff like this, that's totally very Williams.
It is, yeah.
That's the best of it. And the reason I picked it actually is it had no fraternities. Yeah. So I don't know how you guys are with fraternities, but I've always been anti-fraternity. Like when I was your age, I was anti-fraternity. Mm-hmm. So I loved the fact that they had killed off their fraternity.
Yeah.
And I was right about that. That was cool.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, where are we going? So then I went from Williams to Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
So when
you
I
did
arrived,
Masters at Williams too.
yeah,
correct?
when I arrived at Stanford, though, I had a really like radically conservative education in a lot of ways. In good ways, in the sense that I got all the classic. I got this very old school education.
Yeah.
Even by the standards of my time.
Yeah.
So I had gotten like this very kind of Oxford prep school kind of education, which comes in handy at times. But Stanford just like blew my doors off, right? So I was like, whoa. So Stanford was like, there's out gay faculty.
Mm-hmm.
There's out gay students. There's like a gay straight alliance. Whoever heard of this? Right?
Yeah.
They didn't call it that yet, but that's right. But eventually I went from sort of the usual default setting, okay, I'm going to study the English Romantic poets, and I'll write my dissertation about this Kantian thing, the sublime, and which would have been okay, but it was very old school.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had a very old school education. And by the time I came out of Stanford, I was not old school at all, which made it very easy to come back to a community college or something like that. And that happened on Everest. So here's the Everest part of the story.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Love this
which
story.
also gets into Tahoe. So a couple lucky things happened to me when I first came to Stanford on my way out. This is how this book starts, Tahoe Beneath the Surface. So I tell this story, but I get into grad school at Stanford, life-changing experience, amazing, this full ride scholarship, which everybody who gets in the PhD program has, but I didn't even know they existed. So I'm like, oh my God, my life has changed. It was. Oh, and I forgot to say that up to that point, I was being a pretty successful musician.
Oh.
Right.
What
As
instrument?
a little singer-songwriter dude, like little Bob Dylan
you did mention
wannabe.
you
I did.
almost became a songwriter.
Yeah. All right. So that's on the brag. So one of the things that Williams gives you is a very interesting student body.
Mm-hmm.
So my suite mate, we had like one of those suites where you have like 6 rooms, but they all enter the same place.
Yep.
So my suite mate, my suite mate turned out to be this business genius guy.
Yeah.
Who knew at the time? Well, I kind of knew. I knew he was a business genius. So he was my manager. I was a musician, and he decided, I'm going to be your manager.
Like your agent or something.
Yeah, my agent.
Yeah.
And he was like a business genius. So all of a sudden, I have this huge career, right?
Yeah.
And I'm opening for Don McLean, and I'm opening for Harry Chapin, and I'm opening for, like, Livingston Taylor, who's James Taylor's brother. I never got to open for James Taylor. It pisses me off, but whatever.
I don't actually know.
Steve, these are all too old for you.
Yeah.
Other people will recognize
But the fact that you were opening
the song American Pie, which is the number one song of the 20th century, according to many things, it was written by Don McLean.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's okay. I'm used to it. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's one reason it's okay to brag about it, because nobody remembers these people anyway. So I had this whole music career, but when I got into Stanford, it's like, I'd rather be a professor, which was a good decision.
Yeah.
Well, I think I got about as far as I could. And then the interesting part of this little thing is that Steve Case was my roommate, and he was the guy that founded AOL. You might have heard of that.
What?
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. So he was like this total internet pioneer. He just wrote a book about it, which is really good.
So he was your suite mate? Or?
Yeah, he was not my suite. He was my music mate. He was my manager. I was like his first I think he likes to joke that I was his first business.
Yeah.
His joke is, I was Scott Lankford's manager.
Yeah.
Instead of like, really what it is. It's like, my manager was Steve Case.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
His little joke
amazing.
is that, like,
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So, where does this all go?
Everest.
Oh, so Everest. So, well, first of all, I started working at Tahoe at Stanford Sierra Camp all the time, so I spent a lot more time up there than down there. So that's where.
That's still going
okay,
strong.
well, so yeah, it's still going strong, and there should be like a plaque on the wall. I mean, I started their ski touring program, I started their rock climbing program, I was playing guitar for them.
I'm going to talk about rock climbing later, because
yeah, so when I was up there, I would work there every summer, and sometimes I would take a quarter off, blah blah blah. So somehow I talked my way onto this Everest expedition. When this was back when Everest was like this totally elite, only elite climbers thing, which I was not, but I talked my way. I'm a good talker.
Yeah, you are.
I like completely bullshitted my way onto this. Oh, you can't put that in a podcast.
No, that's fine.
I know. I'm just joking. So I completely BS'd my way onto this Everest expedition with all of these like super famous climbers of their time. Partly by telling them that I would raise a lot of money. Yeah. So, which I did. So I was sponsored by Apple Computer. I had the world record for altitude in this like completely funny time in which the high-tech Apple Computer was an Apple IIc. Yeah. Which you will not even understand. But anyway, I'm in the first History of Apple book. I have my own page. So, like, I was all that. Yeah. And now you don't even know what an Apple IIc was, and it was so many years ago, it doesn't matter. But I go on this Everest expedition, and there's 2 expeditions on the whole mountain. I mean, now we're in this like completely collapsed era in which people die waiting in line to get to the top. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how different it was. It was like getting on an Olympic team back then.
Mm-hmm.
This was like going to the Olympics. Like everybody doesn't line up to go to the Olympics, and it's like, so it was, and I shouldn't have been there, but there I was. Good BSer, good money raiser. So Apple Computer and Leica Cameras sponsored me, which was a
How
big
did you reach out? You just reached out to them and said you were going on this expedition, and you had advertised. Well, there must have been some cash.
Essentially, right? Yeah. Essentially, it was Stanford connections. And
it works.
Yeah. So I worked the network, and I just got a little bit lucky too. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was back in the Jobs was still around.
Yeah.
So he liked the idea. I mean, they recognized that it would. They made it They never made a national ad campaign out of it. They wanted to, and then they didn't. So it became sort of an internal Apple thing.
Yeah.
And then they put it in this book. But they knew that if they could say, Apple IIc was used on Everest.
Yeah.
That people would go bananas.
So you used.
And by the way, speaking of climate change, so how do you charge a computer on Mount Everest?
Yeah.
It was
oh
my god! So we had a fold-out solar charging thing in 1985, and I took this thing to like 20,000 feet and ran a whole expedition with it. So then I was sort of like running the expedition with this early version of a spreadsheet. This is when a spreadsheet was this like, you can do a spreadsheet on a computer, like you have no idea.
This,
like it was so revolutionary that you can.
I forgot the name of it. I watched the documentary.
Yes, it was like completely changed. Oh my god! So I used a spreadsheet computer. Because expedition uses tons and tons of supplies.
Yeah,
and it's a huge nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So we did all of the logistics on the computer.
Wow.
Woo-hoo. So
that's groundbreaking.
So there was
no one's done that before.
But the other thing that happened, you have to stop me at some point. But
no, keep going here.
Right. So the other thing that happened. So this is all interrupting grad school.
Yeah.
Like my professors, like I had one professor who seriously, I love this story because it's like so true. Mm-hmm. So this kind of snooty professor looks at me and says, Scott, because I'd tell him, okay, I have to take some time off because I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. And he kind of looks at me like,
I'm just going to go climb Mount Everest. Casually.
I've heard many excuses for not finishing a dissertation. I've heard about romantic crises, health crises, family crises. Yeah. But no one, Scott, no one has ever told me that they could not finish writing their dissertation until they climbed Mount Everest. This is kind of true. So I took 3 years off.
Yeah.
It did. I thought it would be 1 year, and then it turned into 3 years. But the year was a really transformative year to me. So, where this is going is that when I came back, I was a completely different person. Mm-hmm. And I changed my dissertation. I changed everything. Yeah. Like I became this completely different scholar.
Yeah.
So, and partly what happened was like the next year, after I went to Everest, Stanford decided we're going to send you on this alumni travel trek because we can say, oh, we're sending this Everest climber along with the Stanford alum. So they send me. I basically know nothing. I've been to Everest, but what do I know about Nepal? Mm-hmm. But this being Stanford, the other 2 leaders of this trek were the most famous ecologist in the Himalayas, Bob Fleming, at the time, and the wife of Tenzing Norgay, who was the first man on Everest, who was also a personage in her own right within the Sherpa community. So I have like the 2 most knowledgeable people I could possibly trek with, and they kind of gently took me under their wing because they knew better than I knew that I had absolutely no idea what the freak I was talking about. Yeah. And so I realized this under their tutelage. I realized that I had gone to Mount Everest, gotten all this praise for climbing Everest, or not climbing. We didn't get to the top. That's a whole other story. But we were trying to do a really hard route. Nobody tries to do this anymore. Yeah. So we were trying to do a route that no one has ever successfully climbed without people dying.
Were you trying to go to the top?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. But we didn't make it. But nobody died. So the short form is we didn't make it, but nobody got killed.
Back then it was hard, very hard.
Nobody's ever gotten to this route with somebody dying. Yeah. So West Ridge Direct was like, that's it. So, so it was way harder than the thing you see people lining up on. Yeah. Not that that's hard. It's hard enough, but it was like they were not like fixed ropes and Sherpas and all this nonsense. Like this was a route that had only been climbed once before, and people died getting back down. Wow. So it was not an easy route. Where am I going with this? But so when I went on this trek, I realized I had been essentially blind.
Yeah.
And I'd seen nothing. I knew nothing about the country of Nepal. I knew nothing about its history. I knew nothing about its politics. I knew nothing about the people. I knew nothing about the culture. I knew nothing about the ecology, the biology, the geology. I knew nothing. And I have the two probably best people on the planet to teach me this in a gentle and easy walking up the trail kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got back, I realized when I went back to Lake Tahoe that I've been like a guide and all this kind of stuff in the Western United States. And I don't know anything about my own country.
Yeah. Oh.
And here I am learning all about like British romantic poetry 200 years ago in somebody else's country, and I don't know a thing about my own country.
Yeah.
Including about Lake Tahoe. And that's where the Tahoe basically started, was me realizing I'm like Mr. Tahoe around here.
Yeah.
Like I'm the one that's, started all these things for Stanford and da-da-da-da. And I love this place, and I can tell you where to fish and hike and climb.
We should.
But I knew nothing. I knew nothing about where I was.
Yeah.
I had no idea where I was. So then I start trying to figure it out, and that's where the Tahoe book came out of that. But the other thing that came out of it was my myriad dissertation, because I switched completely from so I was like, I'm not studying English Romantic poets in 1802 anymore. Not that that's a bad thing to do, but like, why am I studying the British if I don't know anything about the Western United States? So I wrote this dissertation. I chose Muir because he shaped where we are and who we are.
Yeah.
And also because he's an activist. Like, he not only wrote, he like changed the world with his writing. Like, literally changed the landscape.
Yeah.
So National Forests, National Parks has a lot to do with Muir. He's the first great conservationist or one of them. I mean, that's a little bit of a myth, by the way. It's in the dissertation, but he gets a lot. He gets maybe even more credit than he deserves. But that's how that whole thing started. So Everest actually completely changed my Stanford career.
That's amazing.
And I was a British lit guy, and I became an American lit guy.
It's very mature of you to. That's like almost like a crisis, like a revelatory.
It was, crisis, and it even had to do with. By the way, going to Everest. These are you're a good audience, so I'm just going to keep going. But
I love this.
So
keep going, please.
Back to the LGBT stuff. So I had still not come out until I went to Everest. And again, because I was kind of socialized, so I was, really closeted Denver kid, nothing surprising there for that generation.
Okay.
Then I go to Williams in the middle of the gay rights revolution, and I'm completely isolated from
the
Harvey Milk is doing all this in San Francisco. If I had gone almost anywhere else, but I'm in Williams, I don't even know. I have no clue. I have no clue what's going on. So it takes me a long time to sort of like work my way back out of the closet. And again, that was also a time when educators were afraid to come out. So Stanford sort of empowered me, but it took a couple of years. But when I finally did come out, it had to do with Everest, because I was on the way to Everest. I was doing all this fundraising, which meant I had to go brag about it all the time. And everybody, oh my God, you're so brave, you're so brave, you're so brave. And I'm secretly thinking, yeah, I'm so brave that I can't even tell anybody who I love.
Oh my gosh.
What is courage, right?
Yeah.
So what is really the meaning of courage? And I decided I felt like a fraud, right? Because you're getting all this praise for basically being this selfish guy who's out risking his life for no good reason.
Yeah.
Essentially, right? And secretly you're afraid of the most important thing in your life.
Yeah. For
no good reason, too. I'm at Stanford, for God's sake. It's like, what's going to happen to me at Stanford? Nothing. So I really had this kind of look in the mirror moment where I was like, do you have any courage really or not? Are you really going to keep standing there and let everybody tell you how brave you are? Or are you going to be brave? So I finally came out at the same time. So I changed. So everything changed. In other words. So I threw out my old dissertation, completely new dissertation. Threw out my old dissertation committee, got a completely new field. Now I'm going to be out, and from that moment on, by the way, that's the by the time I got to Foothill, once I was out, I was like, I'm never going back.
Yeah.
I won't work at a place where this is an issue. So if you have an issue, let's just boom.
Yeah.
And I already kind of knew it wouldn't be a big issue here.
Yeah.
But, so I wasn't scared, but what's the meaning of courage is a big thing for me.
That part of that 3-4 year stretch of your life must have been crazy. That's a huge turning point.
It was
a lot of different things.
You're in that part of your life now.
Nobody
warns you about your 20s.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody always talks about your teens. Not that the teen years aren't turbulent and formative, but the game is really on in your 20s.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
There's not so much going back. You can screw up pretty bad as a teenager. And you can make it.
Yeah, when you're growing up, exactly.
Not that people don't struggle and sometimes they go the wrong direction, but you know. in your 20s, it's kind of, there's this kind of game on thing.
Like, I definitely feel that.
Yeah, and it gets
discovering that
more. It gets more intense. So so I became a really different person in many ways, and then also I went back to being the person I'd been at Manual High School. So in some ways, I wasn't a different person. I was the person that I had been before I went off to these super elite Williams College, Stanford-y places.
You found yourself again.
I found myself, which is one reason I came back here.
Yeah.
See? So when I saw Foothill, when I walked up here, the first time I walked up here, I felt like this is home.
Yeah.
Like this is who I was. This is where I come from.
Yeah.
These are my people.
That's so important.
And for the faculty and the students, I had this feeling like these are my people. Like this is who I really am. This is not this thing that I thought I was supposed to become.
Yeah.
So I was pretty clear that this was where I wanted to be. And then I got lucky and I actually got a job. That didn't hurt. I don't want whatever. Yeah. So they took me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so here I still am. But now now you start to know, because the me that you've experienced most intensively is the climate change me.
Yeah.
All right. But so where does that come from? Williams had the strongest environmental studies. I mean, it was otherwise not cutting edge, but in environmental studies it was cutting edge.
Williams did. Wow.
Yeah. So Williams had one of the best environmental studies programs, still does, in the United States. And I took those courses. I didn't become an environmental studies major, but I took the courses as part of my GE. And I was a geology major, which didn't hurt either. They had a rock and geology. I was a geology minor, I should correct myself. But I took enough geology that I actually got it.
Yeah.
And that was part of the Williams thing. You were supposed to be really well-rounded, so they made you take a lot of science. So I did. Right? I took more than I had to, but that's because I ended up loving geology. So I had a really strong environmental studies background from Williams. I was the Earth Day generation, and then Stanford also had a really strong environmental studies kind of orientation. Yeah. And then when I went to Everest, on top of Tahoe, I got like this major dose. I chose to write my dissertation about conservation, sustainability, all that stuff. Then it turns out. Stories are going to go on. You'll never fit any of this into a podcast. Good luck. So
I'll find the good stuff.
This is actually a good stuff. What I realized, I only realized this a couple of years ago, completely consciously. And I thought, okay, again, like everybody says, oh, you're so brave to be on Mount Everest, blah blah blah. And one of the things that people always ask is like, so did you almost die? Well, because it's really easy to die on Everest. Yeah, I mean, it is.
Yeah,
it's really easy.
Yeah.
I mean, people still do. So that's not a dumb question.
No,
you almost like so why would you risk your life like that? But so here's the deal. First of all, I did twice almost die on Everest. And both times, I now recognize it was because of climate change. And this is really weird. Right?
Whoa.
And I had and this 1985, climate change was just coming onto the map for most people, including myself. So we just learned about ozone depletion, which isn't quite the same thing, but it was also when the science started to go public.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was just early blip on the screen. So I'm coming down from Camp 1, and on our route, that was like a huge thing. We didn't go through the ice fall. We had to climb this gigantic cliff.
Yeah.
Like 1,500 feet of rock, almost vertical. So I'm just coming down from the camp to come down and rest and then take more stuff up and all this stuff. So I'm coming down, and a huge piece of this cliff breaks off. Like massive rock fall. I've never seen anything like it. Anything like it.
Is this like an ice wall?
No, it's a rock wall.
Rock wall, okay.
So,
I guess Camp 1.
Yeah, and people in base camp thought, okay, that's the end of Scott.
Wow, yeah.
That's it. So much for Scott. And Grandstaff, I mean, I was with this guy, Randy Grandstaff. And I still remember thinking that I would die. So, like, actually, your life does pass in front of your eyes, as far as I know, because that's the only time I ever, like, literally, like, the little movie started playing in my head.
Oh, my God.
Woo, with the violins, and like, okay, you're going to die. Because, like, the whole mountain's falling on you. And I remember vividly watching these, like, school bus pieces of rock gracefully floating through the air, like right over there, right? And they looked really pretty in a certain way because they weren't hitting anything. They were like flying through the air, like sort of like a football, like the way you can see a football fall through the air, and it's like really pretty, except this was like a school bus sized piece of rock.
Yeah.
And so why am I still here? It just missed us. It missed us by about 100 yards maybe. So it was like right over there.
Yeah.
And it was maybe a quarter mile wide.
Yeah.
So we just totally lucked out. I mean, it just barely missed us.
That thing is huge.
We were not touched. But you couldn't tell because it was so big.
Yeah.
It was so big.
It's not even a rock. The cliff is like...
No, the whole... I mean, it was a whole section of the mountain came down.
Yeah.
Now, why would that happen? It's happening a lot in mountaineering now. So now we get it. Like these immense ice falls on the Matterhorn, blah, 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 rock falls. Those mountains are held together with ice. The ice is melting. Everest is literally melting. The glaciers have massively retreated.
Yeah.
So that's quite likely why this whole chunk of mountain came down. Because it had been held up there and that ice was melting and it wasn't held up there anymore. So people are dying in rockfalls. There's so much more rockfall than there used to be. Now we know for sure that this is going on. Back then, couldn't put two and two together. But I'm pretty sure that like a piece of mountain that size, I mean, it can happen for other reasons, but it was really climate change.
Yeah.
And then just a couple weeks after we got off the mountain, a massive ice dam on a nearby mountain burst on Amadabam, and it wiped out half the villages in the whole Everest region. Completely took out the trail. By the time I went back with Stanford, you had to go around all these places that had been trails and villages because they were wiped out by this massive wall of water. And that's also happening more and more because of climate change.
Yeah.
Like the glaciers are melting, the water puddles up very frequently. You can read about this in geology, by the way. They're called GLOFs, G-L-O-Fs.
GLOFs.
Glacial lake outflows. Outburst flows there.
Okay.
But this GLOF totally took out the Everest region. And that was only a few weeks after we left. So I could have, if I had still been there, probably quite likely would have been washed away by the same wall of water that washed away many other people.
Wow.
So climate change and that's really the closest I came to dying on Everest, right? Like, there were a lot of other ways to go.
Yeah.
But in terms of like when I almost died was when this cliff fell on me.
Yeah.
It should not have been falling on me.
Wow.
There we go.
That's crazy.
So I saw some stuff, and now I'm still into it. So that's why you're stuck with me in climate change. Now you know. So now you finally understand.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
How did you get stuck with me, and why won't I talk about anything but climate change?
Yeah. You should give a lecture on your life.
Yeah.
In class, like the last day or something.
See, I don't like it. I don't usually do this because I don't really want it to be all about me.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And it's not all about me.
But we gain a lot from this.
Yeah.
I think
this
is the lecture on your life.
It goes back to the Everest thing, which is this like, I actually quit mountaineering pretty much completely after that. I mean, I still do ski mountaineering. Like I can do a pretty good telly turn. I'm a good backcountry skier. That's the only place I can really keep up with anybody your age. And even increasingly, that's kind of like maybe. But I can still sort of hold my head up high as somebody who can do this backcountry telly thing, right?
Yeah.
Everything else, and I was never any good. I was never that good. I was a good organizer. I'm like, expeditions need people who can organize. So the people I went with were world famous climbers, and I was just this guy who could climb. But I was with them. But where am I going with this? So people think, like what I realized when I went back was that Everest is all about me. Right? I mean, you don't climb Everest for anybody else. There's the most famous Everest climber of all time, except for Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. It's this guy Reinhold Messner, who was the most famous climber of his generation by far. First man to climb Everest without oxygen, blah blah blah. First man to solo Everest without oxygen, blah 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 blah. I mean, he did everything. He was like the Gretzky of climbing.
Yeah.
And he said something that really stuck with me, which is, people call me a hero. A hero is somebody who does something for somebody else. I climbed Everest for myself. Yeah. It's essentially a very selfish act. And that's not to say that it's not something that that people shouldn't do, but it really hit me when I was back there with these other people who really knew what they were looking at, that what I had done on Everest was essentially was a kind of blind thing, but it was also because I didn't see anything but getting to the top. But it was all about me. I didn't do it for anybody else. And so I really think that Did they still make you read Catcher in the Rye?
I love that.
I haven't read it.
I love that book.
Okay, so do you remember this? So there's a point at which the protagonist's teacher quotes something at him that he doesn't forget, and sort of makes the same point, which is, let's see, I can only paraphrase probably, but the young man dreams of dying nobly for a cause he does not understand. The mature man dreams of living humbly for a cause that he does understand. And I really feel like I would like, in my better moments, I would like to take that to heart, which is why I don't usually like to talk about me, because that's not really why I'm here, right? Including that, I didn't try to teach at Harvard or Berkeley and blah, 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 which is what you're supposed to do when you're a Stanford guy. I said, no, I'm going to teach over here at Foothill, and I will be cooler than that. So there is this kind of thing but that's also about the climate change thing. Like, that's not to make me, it actually isn't very good for my career in some ways. But at the same time, it's like, what are you about? Are you just about you, or are you about trying to do something for other people? Which is what I'm trying to get to you all.
Yeah.
By the way, so the really big deal with this climate change across the curriculum is, can I do for you what people did for me, which is transmit that sense of mission that Muir had. Everybody in my book has that sense of mission. Like, my Tahoe book is organized by people who changed the world, and they didn't do it for themselves.
Yeah,
they made huge sacrifices over and over and over again, but they really all changed the world. And I wanted to tell those stories because I need those stories. You need those stories. We all need those stories. And but that didn't happen to me until somewhere in the middle of grad school.
Yeah.
Right. So there it is. There. I'm going to finally stop.
You
didn't even have to ask a question for like an hour.
I'm glad. yeah.
And now you're stuck with way more material than you can fit in. So it'll be very interesting
awesome
to me what you pick and what you don't pick.
Well, thank you so much for accepting this offer. I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless. That's very powerful.
Well, it's your audience. You're looking actually interested. That's why I didn't stop.
Yeah. No, I'm very interested.
It's not a bad time. I'm getting pretty close to the end of my career, so it's not a bad time to sort of tell some of these stories.
Yeah,
I do worry that Foothill's lost its little mojo. I'm trying to tell some of these stories to Twee.
Yeah.
Because I want her to know who we were. And that, like, partly what's happened is that those of us that were here, like, the institutional memory gets lost.
Yeah.
And we lost a lot of our institutional memory. So we kind of got institutional Alzheimer's right now.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, actually.
Yeah.
And she's that good. Like, I see her as somebody that is that good.
She's very driven to...
She wants to change. She's here to change the world, right?
Is, yeah.
And she's more like the old Foothill than all the people that are at Foothill now in some ways. So I really want her to know the stories.
Yeah.
I think last week we interviewed
we sat down with Twee.
and she talked about service leadership, and like her value of service leadership kind of portrays like what you're trying to say here is that
that's the thing we're working on together.
Yeah, I think it totally fits together. The idea.
Yeah.
No, and that's who she is, I mean, she's had a great career. I mean, she was a major powerhouse lawyer. She was the lawyer for the whole community college system, right? Like, she was incredibly successful. But she's not just out making money for and being a corporate lawyer so that Exxon can rape more people.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, no, so she's using her skill set in a really self-sacrificing way. It's not easy being her. So she's using her skill set for like something that actually helps
you too.
Yeah, you too.
Well, that's why we get each other. So
I think
that's why I'm happy. I'm very happy
together.
I have a new president. I like her a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.